you're going to need a bigger budget. Or not. Because sounds like movie budgets may be taking a step back in the future, and we're going to talk about it. So welcome everybody to TRB. That's right, it's the Resistance Broadcast. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday. We're in the middle of August. We are 9 days away from Ahsoka, which is pretty wild. It's just, absolutely wild to think about. And just for anyone who may, for whatever reason, if you decided to not check out our last episode, first of all, how dare you? Kidding. But second of all, we did make an announcement that we are going to cover Ahsoka. But please do check out our, I made a long statement on that episode that really paints where we stand. We obviously fully stand with the artists, crew members, creators, and everybody involved on the union side of things as they, aim to level the playing field and right some wrongs and get beyond antiquated contracts as things are evolving and escalating in this streaming world with residuals and AI, and it's a lot at stake for the future of art. And but go check out our statement on that, and we'll continue to remind people where we stand on that stuff. But James, 9 days away from that show, Ahsoka. And we have a lot to talk about here. We are going to talk a bit about, movie budgets, because that's, also coming off the heels of what Bob Iger said about the future of movie productions for Disney and stuff like that. But more importantly than that, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. It's funny. I was editing last week's episode, and we had this big soccer talk at the beginning of it, and I was like, we're still in Leagues Cup, and then we lost. So before the episode came out, we had already lost. So on the episode, I'm like, here's hoping. It was one of those things.
Yeah.
But other than that, we have we did at my work, we did our big speaker design competition thing where we have people come from mostly all over the country, but in a lot of cases, or in some cases, all over the world.
Get to vote?
I don't do that. What I do is I meet with the contestants and try to convince them really to sit down on video and talk about their projects and stuff, and kind of try to get a little bit into the weeds with some of what they're creating, what they're bringing to the table, why they brought this particular piece. But it is quite phenomenal when you look at what they do, because these guys are engineers and artists. Because, you just picture you're a home theater, 2 stereo, whatever, but it's woodworking, crazy. And they put so much into how these things sound so perfect. They're the exact definition of the word audiophile. These guys, and you see the same ones every year. And I don't know, it's pretty wild. But we had 60 entries this year in 4 different categories over 2 days. And they bring their speakers in, they get it judged by these guys who, we joke around sometimes. People, have you ever heard the phrase, he wrote the book on?
Of course.
One of these guys literally wrote the book. It's the handbook for how to build speakers. And he did it years and years and years ago, but it's on its 8th edition or whatever.
Is his name Joseph Speaker? Is it one of those things?
Basically, no, it isn't. But anybody who knows about that stuff knows that guy, because if you're going to get into it, there's no way to not come across his name, because he's the guy, But yeah, we had 3 great judges, and they listened to everybody's project. They play these test songs and stuff, and then they grade everybody. And then Parts Express, my company, gives them the winners awards and stuff. But anyway, we do that once a year, except for the COVID years. There was 2 years we didn't get to do it, but we did it in 22 and 23 now again. So yeah, very cool.
Did you know that the sandwich was named after its creator, Earl Sandwich?
I did know that, but I've never looked into it to find out how true or whatever that piece of lore is. I know, yeah.
I saw it on the internet.
But I know that, yeah. Oh, it is real. Everything on the internet is real.
Yeah. Before we get into the show, I just want to...
They fact check that stuff.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody, first of all, for obviously listening and watching and being a part of what we're doing here at TRB. It means a great deal. We're going to be doing the Ahsoka coverage on TRB Live, so it will be Wednesday nights live. We were originally going to do this big branded show with guests and giveaways, sort of like the Mando fan show, but we felt it's best with what's going on now just to review these things, whether, good, bad, indifferent, as we normally would. But I do want to thank everybody also who has joined us on Patreon. It is huge for us as three people with regular lives, regular jobs, to be able to do what we do and put the time in that we do. Because what you watch and hear on TRB is maybe 10% of actually everything that and the time that we put into making this. And the Patreon support is what allows us to keep that going and to also try to do more as we continue to grow and do other things. So if you've been new to the show or you've been listening for a long time and you're able to, we just ask that you at least check it out. Go to patreon.com/resistance broadcast. Tiers start at $5 a month. And if you're able to, check it out. And if you like a tier, sign up. And there's a lot of exclusive stuff on there. We just did our Q&A live this past Thursday, but it's right there on the page. A lot of interesting stories revealed in some of those questions because people ask us about anything, right, James?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Talked about some strange stuff.
Some strange stuff. Stranger Things, but not Stranger Things. But yeah, we have a Discord server. If social media has been letting you down lately, we have an amazing community over there. So just go check it out. Patreon.com/resistance broadcast. And any bit of support helps us a great deal. So we just want to thank anybody who is. And if you're not able to, totally cool. You're still going to get your TRB episodes free twice a week. So
that was something that I forgot to mention in that Q&A we were talking about our community, is that I know for a fact there are people out there that will toss a Star Wars question or discussion out on social media and just get no likes, no responses.
Yeah.
But it's practically unheard of. If you drop a question in our Discord, someone's going to pop in and have that talk with you.
Yeah, sometimes it snowballs into some pretty cool conversations.
Yeah, it's a good place.
Speaking of conversations, we have some stuff to talk about. We are going to talk about movie budgets and what that might mean for the future of creative filmmaking. But for now, James, our first segment of the day.
I fear nothing, for all this, as the Force wills it.
All right, guys, it is time for Will of the Force, where we pose questions.
James, hang on a second.
What?
Hang on a second. Chirrut Imwe, great Star Wars character.
Yeah. Sorry. Great Star Wars character.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, we're gonna pose the questions and ask whether those things that we pose will happen or not. Of course, some of those questions come from our patrons that John was just talking about, actually, which we'll get to in a moment. We're gonna kick off with one here, though, that we want to touch on first, and that is: will you be disappointed if it is revealed that Sabine Wren is Force sensitive? So again, this didn't come from one of our patrons, but we wanted to ask the questions because we're right on the edge of Ahsoka. I'm going to start with you, John. What do you think?
I will, man. I know they keep creating these Jedi that survive 66, and when you look at the original trilogy, it really did make you feel like there was none left. And then every time there's a new video game or a new comic or a new book, all of a sudden all these Jedi pop up and stuff in this era, which I already feel is too much. If they now take Sabine and decide she's going to be Force sensitive because she's able to use lightsabers, and it's just, you have Ezra, you have Ahsoka, and the Kanan, and what Hera's is going to be the only one. It would be too much. It's Oprah giving out the cars. I would be disappointed. I'll roll with it as I do. Like when Star Wars gives me something, I typically, unless it's something I really just don't like, typically I'll find my way to it. For the most part, I'll learn to deal with it, but I would be a bit disappointed if they go that way. What do you think?
So I too feel the same way for everything that you just said, but I'm kind of wondering a little bit, and maybe you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here. How Force using is Ahsoka even at this point? Because I can't think of a thing in, say, like Mandalorian that we've seen of her yet.
I
got
think of
something.
Yeah, she reads Grogu's mind.
That's true, but I guess I'm picturing like in like a battle sense, where she like moves an object out of the way or something, or does something spectacular like block an attacker, something along those lines.
Have there been any clips that lead us to that for the trailers for Ahsoka? I feel like we're gonna get something like that.
No, that's what I'm saying is I have gotten the impression that from Mandalorian, she has really strayed away from being super force using. And maybe that's a limitation of live action. She's mostly like her acrobatic battle, like hand combat style is what we've seen out of Ahsoka. And the interesting thing to me is that when we're getting this whole, like, she calls her master and stuff, and I don't doubt that Ahsoka at some point was training Sabine, but I don't think she was training her in the Force. I think at this point, there's so much to, obviously she's still using the Force, but Ahsoka has had this sort of like thing away from the Jedi. So I don't see this being like she sort of like found out Sabine was Force sensitive. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll train you like the Jedi did, you know? I just don't think that's the case. I think that she at some point said, I'm going to teach you to be a better warrior, similar to what we got out of Kanan when Kanan was teaching Sabine. He wasn't training her in the Force or how to use it. He was telling her, yes, how to use the lightsaber, but that's because that was her weapon.
Right.
So I in the vein of, we've seen some of these television shows go over beats that we've seen in the animated stuff. That's happened a few times now. And I'm almost wondering if they're going to make that relationship similar to what we already saw in Rebels season 3 with Kanan and Sabine.
Maybe.
Clearly not Force sensitive.
Don't you think Filoni chose that way for Rebels because, you know, they probably knew like 3-4 seasons, they wanted to have the focus for that be Ezra and not have to split Kanan's, like, it would, I think it would cut into Kanan and Ezra's relationship if Kanan was also treating and training Sabine as a Jedi, and that would pull away from Ezra a bit, and it would have been too much to do in that show, in that format, 20 minutes every week, you know. I don't know if that's why, and who knows, maybe, like we say, we're going to watch the show, maybe that's his plan is now to do that.
I think that I think that whenever we see this happen, because we've seen it a couple times now, that I think what they're doing is they're just saying, like, we had something really great, but a lot of people didn't get to see it. And if we put it in live action, we can twist it and we can say, oh, it's poetry, it rhymes. But this is a story that we know works, and we're going to bring that to live action. And so I could sort of see that being something that they do here. And like you said earlier, I don't necessarily, I'm okay with it if they go that route, but I'm not down with, I feel like Sabine Wren should be Force sensitive. And I would, I don't want to say I'd be disappointed, man, because I'm always on the ride, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like,
I would figure out a way. Yeah, I would figure out a way.
You know, like, I'd be disappointed if Leia turns out that she was Force sensitive and they have her like moving objects around. It's like, no, it's like when it happens, I'm like, cool.
Well, they did
the story. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it almost seems illogical to do that. But then when you go down that route, I'm like, that's fine. Tell that story. So it is what it is, but I don't think they're going to do that. And I think I've given a lot of my evidence.
And people may chime in saying like, well, Leia's different. It's like, yeah, of course, because it was Anakin's kid and Luke's sister. And we saw beats of it in Empire when she was sensing Luke, and it, like with Sabine, I feel like it would be a little more of a blind side or like a switch turning on.
Sure.
Especially with this show's 8 episodes, like all of a sudden they're going to introduce this, and how are Rebels fans going to feel about that? You know? So yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to one of our Patreon submissions. This one's coming from one of our generals. Awesome. Fulcrum 77, Diana. They asked us, will we get a flashback of Kanan Jarrus in the Ahsoka series? I'll start this one off. I'm going with no. Number one, I think there's that whole aspect of Freddie Prinze Jr. saying that he feels like he's done with the character and he feels like everything they use of him past that point diminishes what he offered and what he gave up in Rebels. And whether you agree with that or not, I think that there's no reason to bring this character into the show at this time. Number one, I know you don't have to have Freddie voice or portray him, but I think that if you, like you just said, there's only 8 episodes. I don't see what the point of trying to tell what Kanan is. It's very easy to say Ezra had a master before because we've gotten that in Star Wars.
Hera could just
great.
Talk about him. That's all.
Yeah, or Hera has a son. Well, who's the dad? Doesn't matter. Like there's these people here, you know. We don't need to know that stuff. And in a lot of cases, I think that those types of things help Star Wars when they just talk about that thing and then don't ever like show you. So I feel like all of those things combined are reasons why this character doesn't have to show up. I'm sure that if we get the moment where Ezra's like, I'm lost, Kanan, show me the way, and he shows up as a Force ghost or something, we'd be like, whoa, nuts, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just like that is a weird, it's not weird, but it's a fantasy that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I just don't think we're going to get that or a flashback or anything like that. This character is only important to Ahsoka and the story they're telling because that happened in the past and they're telling stories about people who knew that character.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. I don't think we will, because I'm thinking about it and I remember Freddie pretty staunchly saying like, nah, I'm done, man. He's like,
right.
Filoni convinced me to do the 9 thing, episode 9 voice. And I was thinking, even if they did get Freddie, let's say they did it and they got a flashback, like I think Freddie Prinze Jr., especially now, it would look weird. It would look like Freddie Prinze Jr. in a Halloween costume or something.
Assuming he's even the one who plays him.
Right. So I have multiple scenarios. So if that's the scenario, that I think that would be a little odd. And I don't think he's lying, so I don't think he's going to do that. So I'm crossing that one off. And the other would be doing a flashback with another actor playing Kanan just for a flashback. And I think that would rub people the wrong way, because it's one thing to say, we are giving you a new actor who's playing this character, Sabine, Natasha Liu Bordizzo. Mm-hmm. We're going full with it. This character is going to have the continued journey, evolution, an arc. That I get. But if you
same with
have
Hera, right?
Huh?
Same with Hera, right?
Right. So yeah, Ahsoka, like any of them.
Yeah.
Ezra, I'm assuming at some point. But if you give us a flashback and recast Kanan just for a flashback, I think that's strange. And I think that would be accepted way less than we are taking this character forward. So for those reasons alone, I don't think they will do that. I don't know. Also, you know, how it applies, I don't think he fits at this point, especially Ezra doesn't seem to be even in the picture. If they do something with him and Ezra and it's just the voice or something one day and they get Freddie to do a voice, maybe. But a flashback with Kanan, I feel like it would be done just to do it. And I don't know that the audiences that they're trying to get to watch this thing beyond the Rebels fans like would understand that payoff. So I just don't think they will.
It definitely is interesting. I'd like to go through sometime. Yeah, I'd like to go through some time and figure out what the like carryover is when it comes to, so like Katie Sackhoff was the voice, is playing the character. Lars Mikkelsen was the voice, is playing the character. Stephen Bloom technically sort of doesn't count, but also does count because they're using him to do the voice.
And he might be doing the motion capture too.
He might be doing the motion capture too. We actually don't know.
Yeah.
But that being said, I feel like that's a little bit of a carryover. They didn't get somebody else to do it. He's recreating the character.
Chopper.
and Chopper as well. But then you've got, you know, the laundry list of characters that we just mentioned who did not carry over.
Ezra being
so
a big one. I mean, obviously
yeah, a big one
too, but yeah.
And then also, if you think about that, if it's a flashback scene, they'd probably also, maybe not, but they might also need to recast Ezra.
Yeah.
Because he'd have to be significantly younger.
He's a teenager, yeah.
So it becomes trickier. And so all that said, I think we're both in agreement that I'd be surprised if Kanan makes an appearance in the show.
Yeah. And thank you for the question, Diana. It is a good question.
Yeah. All right. So will Baylan Skoll, weird name. I always want to say Scroll because of Marvel right now. Will that character follow the trope of the redeemed villain in the Ahsoka series? What do you think, John? You go first.
This is tough. I'm just going to say yes. There was one line I saw about he believes what he's doing is good or something like that. And he mentions Anakin. And the way I'm seeing this play out is I think the magistrate is going to be turned on by her own, dark forces, whether that's Baylan or Shin or even Thrawn. Like I said, I have this feeling
the power that comes out of the portal.
Yeah, I still think
mystical, whatever.
I could see her, Morgan Elsbeth, I think is the character's name. I could see her being killed by Thrawn and saying, like I was saying on a recent episode, I've gotten everything I needed out of you, and now you're done. So if she's out of the picture, I think that Shin character seems like she's fully entrenched. But there's these little pepperings of things with Baylan that seem to be that there's not everything fully gone. So, and they like doing that stuff. And when there's a chance, if they have a bunch of villains, there's a bigger chance that they can do it with one of them. I'm just wondering what happens with the Ray Stevenson thing then, because it's almost like with Reva, like at the end, they had that weird switch in the plot where originally the guy who created the character was going to have her get killed. And then they had her redeemed. But it was like this weird, fast shift from she's going to go kill Luke Skywalker to like, oh, never mind, and I'm going to go leave now. And it was very odd at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it would feel the same because it's, he survived 66. He used to be a Jedi, blah, blah, blah. I think they might do it though. But I don't know. I'm not 100% on this. I just think that if someone would or could in this series, it's him for sure.
So what I would actually love to see more than anything is the villain not be killed, but be put away. And
like imprisoned?
That's one option. The Phantom Zone style of imprisonment, whatever it is. Like, I think what could be really cool is if they sort of put that villain away. The problem is that one of the reasons I would like them to do that is so that character could come back later, but they would only have to be able to do that like in animation or something, or tell it in a book, because he can't reprise his role. What I actually think is going to happen is not a redemption, but more like Maul. Maul, basically, he did, like Vader, for instance, did something noble and it caused him to die. Maul did something bad and it caused him to die. But laying on the ground, you almost feel like he was sort of redeemed because he had you could almost have empathy for his character given the situation. No doubt. Yeah. I think that what we might see here is like, if you push that button, you will die, but you've said the whole time that you were willing to fight for this thing. And so because I said I was willing to fight for the thing and I know I'm going to die, I'm going to push the button and then he's going to get killed or whatever. But like maybe is that last moment, he's like, I knew that was going to happen, but I stand for what I stand for and I'll never let that go. And then he just like fades away or something. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not redeemed. You did the wrong thing. But it might be one of those.
Regret.
Yeah, it's sort of like, well, I don't even know if it's regretful. It's just kind of one of those things. Like for me with Maul, I think he was sort of like, I'm the bad guy.
He was hell-bent on revenge on Kenobi.
Yeah, and given in this moment, there was this weird connection that they had where they're like, he said, we will be avenged. Like it was, you had problems in your life, I had problems in my life, and neither one of us deserved it. So they had this like connection there at the end, but I don't think he was redeemed, and I don't think he was like, he did the right thing in the end. They
had that moment over Luke.
That's what I think is more likely. Yeah, right. That's what I'm talking about. The twin sons thing. And Ezra was there too, which is crazy to think Ezra was there when like Maul died. He didn't see it, but he was like there, you know?
Yeah, I do like when that happens. But have you seen the movie The Rock, right? It's sort of like,
you know what's funny? When I said, if I push this button, I saw the look on your face that was like, I'm pretty sure he's going to say this happened in The Rock.
Well, yeah. Ed Harris.
I mean, I must have seen it and I must know what it is, but like,
well, because Ed Harris, like he goes on this, he was a war hero and he goes on this thing because he feels like he's been slighted and ignored. And then by the end, he can't bring himself to, they called his bluff and he can't bring himself to do it. And then what ends up happening is, you know, the missiles go off and stuff. And he's like, what have I done, sort of thing. And he regrets it, but he doesn't get redeemed. He dies for what, you know, has happened. So yeah, it's not a redemption, but you pity him, like you said about Maul laying there, because you're like, oh, maybe there, you know, at one point there was something there, and it's now just lost, and he doesn't get a chance to see that redemption. It's different from Vader, because Vader actually committed an act to save his son, and people say he's redeemed in the eyes of his son, not the galaxy, and I believe that too. But at least he had that redemption moment with his son, whereas, you know, I don't know if the situation I'm talking about with The Rock, or like this hypothetical we're making up about Baylan Skoll, maybe that doesn't happen at all. So, but
I know. I hope he's not one note, man. I think Filoni's smarter than that with the whole, like, it's the orange lightsaber and there's all these different things. I think he knows what he's doing as far as like explaining like the motivations of this character. And I honestly just don't feel like he gets his opportunity to bring Ahsoka to live action and he makes the villains like bad guy, you know, or whatever. Yeah. I just think there's going to be something more to it.
They definitely leaned into the fact that Thrawn is definitely the villain, so they're not
playing around
with that one.
Yeah.
But I am a little nervous at what's going to happen with this character, because whatever happens, Ray Stevenson's gone. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's even worse than like the Obi-Wan Reva thing, because at least with that they could fix it by, you know, bringing her back or telling more stories or showing what she's been doing.
Right.
But if this ends with him like surviving, that also makes me worried too. Like, like you never know. I don't think they're doing this. This is not tinfoil hats, but it like there is always the chance that like the character was intended to die or go to prison or something, and they're like, "No, man, push him off the cliff." No, I meant not. Yeah, no, sorry. It was intended that he would stay alive, but they had to change the ending and kill off the character, reshoot something, do it digitally.
God,
I know it's lame, but like, there's always that chance that they're like,
would
hey,
they tell us that?
Can we fix this? They probably would not. No.
Yeah.
They didn't tell us the whole thing about the Obi-Wan ending. That's still speculated that there was a change, you know?
Yeah.
It's not set in stone that it did happen.
There were definitely changes in the scripts. Whether they filmed that or not, I don't know. But if Baylan Skoll, imagine Baylan Skoll, like the show ends with he kidnaps Sabine or like something big, and like they're like, oh, we don't, like, what do we do right now?
Well, that's the whole Marvel thing right now with what's his name? Who's playing
Kang?
Yeah. They like I'm not exactly sure how they're going to handle that. They still got Loki season 2 coming up here, and he seems to be prominent in that. And it's like, I don't think
yeah.
that's going anywhere, but like I don't know how they're gonna like resolve that because it's not like that character died. It's like
And that's still,
he's the
I
one.
don't even want to comment on that because that's still all muddled where like he may have been exonerated. I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but you're right. Yeah,
I don't think he's made any public appearances or made any statements since the
No,
whole thing
yeah, but that
happened.
doesn't mean anything, you know.
It doesn't. You're right.
Yeah.
But
All right.
his representation also dropped him. So I don't know. I'm not saying anything. The accused, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Last question here for Will of the Force. It's another Patreon submitted question. One of our patrons, specifically Commander Chris. Chris, where's Lacey?
One of our Belgian prop boys.
Yeah. Chris asked us the question, will any of the villains die in Ahsoka season 1? Did we just discuss it? If so, who do you think it will be? Well, I'm going to go right off and say that we both are on the page that Baylan Skoll probably dies, right?
Yeah. I'm going Morgan Elsbeth. I think Thrawn is going to kill her.
And what is the name of the princess? The girl.
Shin?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
You think they're all dying? Except Thrawn?
I'm going I'm going Baylan and Shin, but
what about that Inquisitor?
Morgan.
That former Inquisitor?
Oh, that gone.
Done.
That is
Episode 2.
That's a Sith trooper if I've ever seen it.
August, dude, August 23rd, we'll be going to live TRB Live, and we're going to be like, remember that? Marek, whatever the character's dead.
Yeah. I'm pretty certain it's even in like the first episode too.
Oh, yeah,
like,
that's what I mean. First night, boom.
Yep.
Yeah, but I have a feeling Magistrate.
I'm with you on that. That makes sense to me, but I think there's too many villains, and I think one that could carry over makes more sense that the Magistrate would versus these character, which seems to be tonally just for the show. Whereas Magistrate seems like it's like,
and I bet
a longer played out character.
I bet, because I've always liked Ray Stevenson, I bet I'm gonna love that character, and it's gonna suck so bad watching it, knowing that there's just no more of it.
Yeah. But again, I don't want that. I don't want a redeemed villain. I would love to just see him be like bad.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be so cool.
I agree.
All right. Well, that is it for Will of the Force this week. John, what section are we going into next?
Oh, let's get into a discussion. How about that?
All
right. Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right. Our discussion this week. Bob Iger talked about it. Will smaller movie budgets spark more creative filmmaking? So, as you know, the recently turned, speaking of villains, recently turned villain Bob Iger. Don't get mad if you're still a Bob Iger fan. I'm just kidding around. But he recently revealed plans to cut back on production budgets for future films. Now, based on the performance of some of the recent blockbusters like The Flash and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which had severely bloated budgets and both underperformed at the box office, it's clear that a change was coming. That Bob Iger said it that quickly, maybe a little bit surprising, but nonetheless, I don't think anyone's surprised. The question is, how will the budgets be reduced? And could it be a good thing? Could smaller movie budgets spark more creative filmmaking? So I thought it'd be an interesting discussion to have, James, because you know me, I love the behind the scenes documentaries and making of movies and the making of Star Wars books and the stuff that went into. I like the imaginative spirit that goes into how are we going to make that scene, before the technology existed. Steven Spielberg using old tricks of stepping on wood planks to shoot sand in the air for misfired bullets. I love that stuff. Using a piece of cardboard for the arc on the shadow on the wall. It was just them holding a piece of cardboard of the cutout of the arc, Stuff like that is very charming to me, and I think it is inviting for future filmmakers to say like, wow, if they did that, I can make movies too. And now we're in this world where it's just like $300 million, do whatever you need to do, and all the visual effects you need and everything. And there have been great movies put out recently, but I think me personally, I feel like having that quote unquote blank check or that comfort of knowing you have that backing to certain extents. I mean, I'm sure there's caps on this stuff. I think it inherently, and not on purpose, but I think it just naturally and inherently squashes a little bit of that ingenuity and creative thinking and like finding obscure or unorthodox solutions to getting things done. And sometimes less is more, and sometimes being squashed with your budget leads to less. My famous example is Bruce the Shark from Jaws. That shark not working actually made that movie great, because it led to people not seeing the shark a lot until the very end of the movie. So you know where I stand. I don't know where you stand, so I'm going to throw it to you. Do you think, we know it's happening, so that's going to happen. So
we don't know it's happening.
That's
one way I'm starting this conversation.
You don't think that movie budgets are going to come down? No. Okay. So now that puts a crux into this discussion. So
it doesn't. I'm saying if like we can have the discussion of whether smaller movie budgets would or wouldn't, how would that sparks creativity. But I honestly, I took his comments and I was like, I just don't see this happening. And you know, I feel like what you're saying is like sort of public facing, like, you know what we really need to do, guys? We just need to get back to the heart of filmmaking.
No.
That's how it felt to me. It was like, what we need to do is we need to back off with all of our crazy budgets, and we need to stop spitting out Marvel content left and right. And everybody's going, yeah, finally, this is what I've been saying the whole time.
You think everybody's saying that? I don't.
I think a lot of people are starting to get burnt out on those properties. We've talked even on this podcast about like, is Star Wars even special anymore because they've been putting out so much content? It used to be this thing where like every, 20 something years or whatever, they put out these 3 movies and that was Star Wars and it was really cool. And now there's like Disney Plus, everything and all this. So I feel like there is a conversation about people saying that these big studios are putting out so much of this big branded content revolving around sequels and big budget properties like where they're adapting these books or whatever into these big things, that people just get burn out on them and they don't like them. And so a studio saying like, we want to back everything off. We want to make the budgets realistic. We want to bring in a bunch of creative minds. We want to do original properties. That's all stuff that like people want to hear, but studios don't actually do because they don't make money, that process doesn't make money for them.
I see what you're saying, but I'm going to disagree because I think the proof is in the pudding. I think what just happened with some of these movies that have come out have made them realize that these things aren't guarantees the way we thought they were, at least some of them. And even with these big IPs that Bob Iger keeps talking about leaning into, The Flash, I'm not saying The Flash is the biggest character in the world, but you bring it back Michael Keaton's Batman. Like, I thought that movie was going to do pretty well. I thought at least 500 million or something like that. The Robert Pattinson Batman made like $700 million. Mm-hmm. And not a lot of people talked about it really. So then Indiana Jones, like I did a short on our YouTube. I was like, that's going to make $800 million. But that was before they marketed it. I thought they were going to like market that movie, and they really didn't. I don't care what people say.
Here's another question I have. So, this might come. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I think they're looking at this and say, we can still make really good movies and they don't have to cost $300 million on production, not marketing, just production. Those budgets are.
So here's my question out of naivety. What are they spending the money on in the first place? Because a lot of people would say, well, in a lot of cases, it's big actors or whatever. So maybe that's the case. If it's like a Robert Downey Jr., Robert Downey Jr. is getting paid, but your background actors are not. But I think in a lot of cases, what people tend to go towards is they say it's these crazy special effects budgets.
Yeah.
But are they actually like, because the VFX artists say they're being worked really hard and they're getting ready to go on strike. And I don't know if the strike is because they're being worked hard or if it's because of payment. Is it because of payment?
I think
is the visual effects really expensive?
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're mixing payment to someone hired to do the work with the cost of the work. Those are two different things. So, and I think we're getting a little too deep in the weeds here on this aspect of it based on like the topic of the conversation. But yeah, visual effects cost a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. Look at The Flash. And did you see it?
No.
There are shots in that movie that look like they're from the Scorpion King, when The Rock turns into the Scorpion King.
But this is my question though, John. It's like, because look, they spent a lot of money on that movie.
Yeah.
And the special effects were bad. So what's going on here?
Well, that's the thing. It got so inflated and bloated. I feel like they got to a point where they're like, we got to cap this. We can't spend more money on this movie. So I think that's a part of it.
But my question is, what are they spending the money on? That's
I don't think actors are like what's making the budgets inflated. I don't think that's
it can be. There was discussion of Robert Downey Jr. around like the Endgame stuff, but that whatever. I'm merely getting it. Like, I think there's discussion around this whole thing because when people say, oh, they spent, 200, 300,000 on that movie or whatever, it's like, what do you see? Yeah, I always do that for some reason, but it's, what are you seeing on screen that is that budget? Where does that money go to? And a lot of times people point to it's the visual effects. But in this case with The Flash, the visual effects were notably bad. Audiences were able to pick up on how they were bad.
But there were still a ton of visual effects shots in almost every scene. Like, so some of the effects were good. There were just some that were like, oh, wow, they really pulled it back on that. It wasn't the whole movie had bad special effects. There were some of the shots that were like, wow, that's really good. But there was such an inconsistency. So for people who haven't seen The Flash, there are dazzling special effects in this movie. But then there are some you're like, holy cow, that looks like it's from 1998.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is they're high budgets. These movies cost a lot of money. And even if you use inflation and compare the, like, say, original Star Wars trilogy or even the original Indiana Jones series and use inflation, they're not touching the current cost of what movies cost today. So they're pumping a lot of money in. How they are, we would need itemized lists to find out. I'm not going to sit here and make guesses, but I know It does cost a lot to make these movies overall. And I know a part of that, and I've talked to people who do work in the industry, like the cost of lumber being higher can be a thing for building sets. And like, there's a lot of little things that add up. And like, look at the set that Rian Johnson built for Octo for The Last Jedi. That's this massive set. The Kajimi set in Rise of Skywalker, like these big major things, these big major productions. So the question is, and I think the answer is, if they are, and I think they will because of the results that are happening at the box office, if they do reduce budgets for these quote unquote big movies, can they still deliver a good movie? And I think they can. And I just like the idea of getting back to what makes a great filmmaker. It's finding solutions within the confines that you have. Because if you just give somebody who is creative a blank check and say, like, just make this movie. And when I say blank check, I mean, like, here's a $350 million budget to go make the next Indiana Jones or the next Jurassic Park or whatever.
Yeah.
You're going to find some level of comfort in that and not be like,
they lead with like, just make the best movie you can think of and we'll approve the budget. You know what I mean? And so they go, oh, great. A giant wave or crushes the city or something, you know what I mean? Like, they come up with what they're selling the producers on is the best story they can come up with.
Well, yeah.
Where it's starting from?
I think, like, take a screenplay and you have storyboards and they have it all mapped out, and then they realize, wow, this shot's going to cost this much money. You know, what if we don't show the creature here and you just see the shadow and you see the reaction to the people, and we cut away before the creature bites their head off or something, and we save ourselves, you know, $3 million by not showing that shot. At the same time, maybe there's a little artistic flair to that, where you're not, you know, it's not the Meg, it's Jaws. You're not seeing this person getting, you know, you're not seeing Samuel L. Jackson being swallowed whole by a mutant shark in Deep Blue Sea. You're seeing the lead up to it in a Hitchcockian way, which is more artistic to me. So I guess that's sort of where I came from this. It sounds like a negative thing that Bob Iger put out there, saying like, we're going to make less movies, put more focus on those movies, but also find ways to spend less money on that. And I do think with those types of limitations, it will inevitably lead to more creative choices and more artistic choices by the directors and filmmakers.
Man, you know, there was a post I saw earlier this year at somewhere where this guy was like recording, you know, TikTok or something. He was at the grocery store and he was filming the self-checkout machine. And he was making a comment about, you know, when we were sold on this idea of the self-checkout, it was so that we could just buy this machine and then we wouldn't have to pay workers. And we wouldn't have to pay, you know, the salaries and the insurance and everything that comes with it, which would bring the costs down for, you know, but like, what are we seeing as consumers from that choice that was made? We've now automated the jobs.
Yeah.
But we've seen no drop in price from the groceries. Mm-hmm. We didn't bring the cost down really.
What are you getting at?
Somebody else. What?
What are you getting at here?
I'm getting at, we're talking about a machine that is working at $300,000 a thing. And we're being told that if we scale things back, that it would make things better. And we're being told that the movies will turn out better or whatever. I think that as we move away from, well, now we don't have to go from location to location. We can just do it in this one room. But we're finding out that the budgets for those shows are just as high as going to the location shows. We've talked about that story.
Yeah,
the reason we do the visual effects is because then we don't have to build the creature. We can just build the creature in the computer, and then we can, like, you know, move around and do all the different shots or whatever. It's like we're lowering the cost and still being able to do what we wanted to do before.
Yeah.
But that's not happening because visual effects prices or how much we're putting into it it's like it's still going up.
You know what I want to see? I want to see more use of like miniatures and that sort of artistic.
But that's not cheaper.
It's cheaper than building a full scale set of something. Yeah, I mean, just literally by sheer
I don't
size.
disagree with that. But I think what is bothering me it's not bothering me about this conversation, but it seems like something that I'm trying to get out is like, I feel like at one point we were like, we would have to build this and now we can just do it cheaper because we could just do it in the computer. But it's like the cost of movies have actually gone up. So you would think they would be like, well, then why don't we just build it? It would be cheaper and easier to just build the stupid thing than the cost of the overinflated special effects that everybody's using. Why don't we just do it the way they used to do it and build the stuff, and then it would be cheaper and we could save money? But it's like, it's such a weird thing because we were sold on visual effects being the cheaper route. But now it seems like the visual effects craze has gotten so big that we're going to movies like The Flash and we're like, where's all the money going? It's all going digital effects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's all the money going? It's going into all the digital effects. So it's like, okay, remove that stuff. Then what are they doing? They're like doing it practically somehow.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's what we were that was more expensive.
I think everything is more expensive now. I mean, we see it. You
Well,
talk about the grocery store. I mean, I had to go buy a new TV because my daughter threw an action figure at our TV and broke it.
Oh,
so we're literally tonight. I had to go buy a new TV, and the TV was moderately priced. But I'm walking down the aisle at Walmart, and I see a box of like cereal. And I haven't bought a box of cereal myself in a while, but it was like a standard size box of cereal, Trix or whatever, honey, not Cheerios, whatever, $4.80 for like the regular size little box of cereal. And I was like, what?
If it's a name brand cereal, it's probably a skinnier box than we remember.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And it's just
now
crazy.
standard, but for years they've been slowly like making those boxes smaller so they can keep the price the same.
Right.
But it's less cereal in the box.
So my point is, and not to get too far on this tangent, but it's like everything costs more now, but inflation is certainly a part of it. And we have
I'm
to,
not talking about inflation.
No, but you have to, because the cost of the supply chain is very expensive. And that's why groceries are so expensive now.
Right. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about, you mentioned, what was the one movie you mentioned at the beginning that you said like in today's age, that would be like 50 million?
Oh, A New Hope. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying like counter in inflation, true. But what we're talking about is we're talking about people overspending.
Right. But what I mean is like the cost of lumber to build sets, the cost of supplies, the cost of gasoline to transport things. Like everything costs more right now than it did 5 years ago. Overall due to inflation. I'm not talking about inflation on a movie budget 50 years ago compared to now. That's not what I mean. I mean the inflation of goods and services now.
But if somebody made Star Wars today, it would be 55 million, right?
If they made it exactly as they made it then, and things cost the same in relativity.
That's what I'm saying. So if the argument is people should make movies like they used to in today's age, because they could make a movie like Star Wars, it would look like Star Wars, but in today's age, that movie would only cost like 50 million, but instead they're spending 250 million on Star Wars in today's money.
Yeah, but then also like look at, and this,
but you have to keep up. You can't make a movie that looks like Star Wars today.
I'm not saying that, but I mean, aside from some shots, I think a lot of the Indiana Jones movies hold up very well in comparison to the current one.
I don't disagree.
And for like Temple of Doom, for example, a lot of the mine chase scenes were a blend of actors in the car and miniatures and a lot of like things like that. And yeah, that stuff costs money, but not as much as probably digital effects of that would cost. Not as much because the time you have to put in for the digital effects versus the time you would take filming the built miniature. And then also, if you were to build a to scale version of that track for certain scenes. So I think they're going to need to go, like, I always feel this way where sometimes things get so big, a bubble bursts and you restart civilization, so to speak. The asteroid hitting the Earth and the dinosaurs dying and Earth starts over again. I feel like that's like with anything. It's like people buying vinyl records again. Things are cyclical. Things always come back. I think that's going to be how sort of movies are. If indeed they realize people aren't going to see these movies as much in theaters. We're not sure why, but we need to adapt. And if we believe in that model, and we believe that we can still make money in theaters and let that trickle into our other products, we need to find better ways to make these movies in less expensive ways. And I just personally think the best way to do that is to use creative ingenuity and say like, well, maybe in this scene, we don't need to show all of these beasts or something like that. Let the audience use their imagination as to what that might look like or something. And that's how a lot of films were done back then. You didn't have to always see the face of the monster or, the giant explosion. And I'm using action movies because those are usually the ones with the big budgets. But like independent movies always have to cut those corners. And sometimes those are the ones that win the awards because they feel more artistic.
Right. But they don't make money. So the thing that I'm asking here is if
They
it
make money.
seems
They're very profitable.
the
Like-
small independent films.
Yeah, if you make say you made a movie for like Blair Witch, which cost like $60,000 to make.
Oh,
and it makes
right.
$80 million. That's a massively profitable movie because it was 90% profit. Like,
Well,
it doesn't mean it made $1 billion, but it was a profitable movie for that studio.
I don't know all the arguments on the movies that like it, you know, they weren't going to make their budget back, but then they got nominated for Best Picture, and so a lot of people went and saw it, and therefore it actually ended up making its money back or whatever. But I would tend to think that a lot of like those lower budget movies, they sort of are a way for a studio to allow people to create, and maybe it's like a smaller gambles. It's like penny slots or something. Like I feel like they're playing in smaller things, so they don't really make money. Where the studios make their big gambles and where they actually make a lot of their money is they say, we're going to put 300,000 into this and hope that it makes 300 million and hope it makes $1 billion. Sometimes you're going to get losses, but for every 3 losses, they only need one movie to make 1.5 billion for it to pay off, because then they just funded their other 3 losses.
Yeah.
My thing is, then that becomes the question is, if it's as simple as saying, why don't you guys just make a good movie for less cost? And if it's still good and you get rid of all this crap that people don't like bad special effects and stuff, just pull it back, it would probably make more money, you know? And like, there's this argument, but I'm trying to figure out why studios haven't figured onto that very simple formula. Why don't they bite that? And I think it is because there is some sort of bigger statistic that they're going, no, what you don't understand is we want to pour as much into this visually because we need people to feel justified in going to the theater. Because that's why the Top Guns and the Mission see it on the biggest screen possible, because they need people to go to the theater. If they dialed back all these big budget movies and made them better movies, I actually think people would not be as inclined to go see it in the theater. I still think even though it's a good movie, they'd be more inclined to just wait on it.
Yeah. I
think they're trying to keep the theaters alive right now by being like $300 million Flash.
I don't think so. I think that's
where my argument falls apart is streaming services doing the same thing.
I think audiences get turned off by hearing how much a movie costs to make, especially when people today maybe, you know, struggling to pay their bills and stuff. Like, I think they're like, why did it cost you $300 million to make that piece of crap, you know? But I just did a quick comparison of
you wasted $300 million. Yeah. We'd be better off if you just didn't spend that money and give it to, you solve world hunger instead of making the Flash, whatever. Yeah.
So I just did a comparison of On Stranger Tides, Pirates of the Caribbean. Apparently it's the most expensive movie ever made, and it costs about $400 million to make. And which
that is the 4th one.
I don't know if it's the 4th one, but I could be wrong that it's the 4th one,
because it goes not Dead Man's Chest. Is Dead Man's Chest the first one? And then
no, Curse of the Black Pearl, then Dead Man's Chest, then At World's End, then On Stranger Tides, I think is the 4th one.
No, there's a 5th one. That one I think is actually Dead Man's Chest. The 5th
Dead Men Tell No Tales.
That's Dead Men Tell No Tales.
That's 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are talking about the 4th one.
The 4th one.
Okay.
So almost $400 million to make. Not that good of a movie. Curse of the Black Pearl, the first one, great movie, $140 million. Now, I agree with you. Part of that is probably Orlando Bloom made more money. Keira Knightley made more money. I'm sure. Johnny Depp probably.
Budgets also got bigger.
Budgets got bigger. But these movies, we're not talking 1977 to 2019 now. We're talking about, 8-year difference. Not that bad.
One thing I will say that adds into that is just the sheer fact that one of those movies was an original, new, creative, cool thing that no one had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And the other one was the fourth sequel, and people were like, I've seen it, and they don't care. So that it's sort of an unfair.
I'm not talking about box office, though. I'm talking about budget.
Well, I thought the argument was that one of them that was actually good made money.
No, one of them that was good cost 140 million to make. The fourth movie, which I don't think was all that good, was the most expensive movie ever made. $400 million.
But how much profit did they make though? Because I understand your point, but I'm saying that also I feel is part of the factor, because the reason a studio would make a $400 million movie is because they can spend $400 million and make $1 billion. So who cares if it's 600 million they make profit, 500 million they make profit, just as long as they make that movie.
Stranger Tides cost 410 million, made $1 billion. But I don't know what marketing costs were. So they're just that alone's a difference of 600. Black Pearl cost 140 million, made 650 million. So
the more money they spent, the more money it made in this example.
But I think, to your point, it's because of the momentum of usually they're
trying to get people into the theater by being like, now there's 2 volcanoes that explode. You know?
Yeah.
Like whatever it is, they're trying to raise the bar.
They're going to see it off the legacy of the first one.
Right.
Yeah. You're never going to convince me that they couldn't have also made that movie for 180 million or 200 million and not gotten the results they needed out of it. So
you think so? If they would have scaled that movie down and made it and focused more on the story, you think it also would have made $1 billion?
Yeah. Yes.
I disagree.
All right.
I disagree, especially a movie that's on its 4th one and people are sort of burnt out on it. You need to get people into the theater. You need to give them a reason to go see that, and they want to see 2 volcanoes
explode. News for you. That movie's
not a half of a volcano explode, because I already saw one exploded in the first one.
But I got news for you, pal. That movie's not making $1 billion today, because this was 2011, I think, and people weren't on Netflix as much. The other ones didn't exist. It's a different world now. So to make $1 billion and rare make $1 billion, like a Top Gun Maverick or Barbie or something like that, isn't going to be the way we thought it was when TFA did it. Rogue One, we're like, oh man, TLJ even did it. Star Wars is bulletproof. And then, all these movies start dropping off, and then the pandemic, whatever. So it is different, and it does need to change. So I guess my point is, if it needs to change, I am just hoping, with my putting my optimistic lenses on, that it leads to more creative filmmaking. That's all I'm saying. And I think it will have to at that point, because you'll do less locations. Because I was looking at on Stranger Tides, it says the 4 main things that led to its inflated budget were, yes, talent costs were higher. So you're right. Maybe it's signing.
I'm not like saying like that's the big thing. I think
no.
Yeah,
but
I noted that, maybe.
So and you bring in new actors, and I get that. You got to come see, Gerard Depardieu or whoever that guy's name is. Not Gerard Depardieu. Who's the guy I'm thinking of from No Country for Old Men?
Here's a simple question for you: when it comes to a sequel being made,
Javier Bardem.
Do you not believe that the second one has to be bigger or better in order for it to up the stakes?
Depends on your franchise. Depends on your movie. I don't necessarily think that Empire was bigger than Star Wars. In terms of how it was made, it cost more, but that's because George Lucas funded it. But
yeah, I think that's tricky. I think that probably does come down to it, though. Is he just had more confidence in it, so they spent more money.
Half of Return of the Jedi was filmed in the Redwood Forest outside of San Francisco.
But if George was alive today, he would be using the visual effects, wouldn't he?
I know, but he would probably also be like, I don't care if my movies make money. He said that. He's like, I don't care if my movies make money. I make my movies to make my movies.
Like that.
Bob Iger is not George Lucas.
I know. I'm just saying that maybe the interesting thing here is really getting into the nitty gritty of the difference between George making the original trilogy with his own money in a world where he had to make it in real locations and things like that. Then when he made the prequel trilogy, he was able to use computers and digital and stuff to, if I'm not mistaken, the point would be to make things that were not possible, but also to keep budgets reasonable, because he didn't have to like build a castle. They could just like build it in the computer, right?
He liked the idea of being able to create whatever was in his mind. That is true.
Right.
But he also was he hated film editing actual film. He hated it. And that was his obsession with filming it digitally. Yeah. So that like all these like technology advancements he came up with is because he hated doing back end stuff like that. And also wanting to have his vision, just whatever he thought, make it work, you know?
Do the inflation adjustment. I'm still sure he probably spent more making the prequels than he did the originals.
100%. Yeah. But that's sort of the point. Like these things are always going to get more expensive.
No, I'm saying not if you adjust for inflation.
Yes. Even with even playing field and everything's at the same inflation or, you know, cost of $1, value of $1, prequels definitely still cost more. Yes.
I know. So what I'm saying isn't your argument, why don't we tone it back down and bring it back to reasonable budgets?
They're going to have to do that because box office returns aren't going to be what they once were. People get their information, their entertainment from all sorts of places today. That's why TV ratings are down, because people are watching things on their phone instead, or they're just streaming something on Netflix. It's just across the board. It's just a different world, and that you have to adjust. So if movies are going to adjust, and they're still going to make, you know, quote unquote big movies that we want to see on the big screen, I want to see my Star Wars movies on the big screen. They're going to have to dial the budgets back. And my hope is in doing that, they still figure out a way to make a good movie. And what will separate the good from the bad are the good filmmakers who find a way to cleverly deliver an incredible scene for less money. And if that means cutting out some shots and leaving stuff to the imagination of the audience, I'm all for that, man. But I think it's inevitable that change is coming. And I don't think Bob Iger is bluffing. I think he's like sort of saying like, look at what just happened. We have an Indiana Jones movie come out that made less money than a Han Solo movie that didn't star Harrison Ford. And that movie was called a disappointment. So it's a shockingly different world right now. And the Barbies are going to be the exception to the rules. To the point where that movie caught fire, where brands wanted in on it. So they made their own marketing for it. That wasn't a part of the marketing budget. They're like, we want a piece of this pie. We want people to come to our store or buy our product because we're talking about this new pink themed thing. You know what I'm saying?
Look, you catch me on any day that we're not having this discussion. You say, do you think that they should make movies for less money? And then they would actually maybe make some money on it instead of like breaking even or losing money because they spent, you know, $250 million on it.
But I'm not saying they should. I'm saying they're going to have to.
Okay. I'm saying I think I usually agree with that, but what I'm trying to get to the thing here in this discussion is, why are they making these movies for such big budgets? You're saying they're going to have to pull it back, but I'm looking at, okay, Indiana Jones was a failure. Why was it a failure? Was it because they spent $300 million on the budget, or was it because let's say the marketing was exactly the same, but they just spent $150 million on the budget and not $300 million? We don't get the same movie, but you think that the movie being $150 million has the potential to be so much better that it would have made $1 billion at the box office? And I say, I don't think this is a movie budget problem. This was a marketing problem.
Do you know how much money Top Gun
So
Maverick
it almost
cost?
would have helped as Indiana Jones if they would have spent another $100 million on marketing. Right?
Guess how much money Top Gun Maverick cost to make? If you had to guess. Real F-18s.
Because of
a
the
lot
movie,
of insurance.
because of the discussion we're having, I'm going to shoot low. I'm going to say 85 million.
85 million? The original Top Gun probably cost 85 million. No, it was 175 million.
Okay.
I would have thought 250 minimum. I mean, just watch that movie. You're telling me they couldn't have used the same level of resource and made Indiana Jones for 175 million? They absolutely could have.
Yeah.
I want to know how much it costs to do the like you were saying about, oh well, if, you know, Corridor Crew or whatever can do blank.
Right.
Like, was it the young Indiana Jones scene that cost the most money? Like, why did I want to know? Actually, I want to just ask that question. Why did Indiana Jones 5 cost $300 million to make?
This goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning. Why did it cost $300 million? What
I agree with you on that.
Screen are we what
I'm
on
with you on
screen
that.
are we looking at that cost $300 million?
I'm with you on that.
So, but then I think what it is partially visual effects, but I don't feel like that movie was super visual effects heavy other than like the beginning, right?
Oh no!
But then,
I mean, there's a lot of.
I know, but it's not. But it didn't.
And the locations too.
Feel like
the locations probably cost a lot of money too.
That's the other thing I was going to say is traveling. So how could they have cut the movie down? They would have had to cut down the locations.
No, I would say filming more in studios as opposed to, you know,
actually going and doing it, which is what we praise like Force Awakens for doing. Is like, oh, they're not using the volume. There's still a benefit to actually going to
they still filmed
Abu
a lot
Dhabi
in
or
Pinewood
whatever.
Studios.
Right?
They still filmed a ton in Pinewood Studios.
I know, but Force Awakens was expensive. We just say it's okay because it made money. If Force Awakens spent the same amount of money and failed, then we'd be like, they got a problem. And it's like they don't have a problem.
Most
when
of Force Awakens, except for Jakku, was filmed inside a studio.
Well,
Killer studio, Maz's studio.
Yeah, you know what's funny is actually I've been
studio.
saying Force Awakens, but I've been thinking Rise of Skywalker because I said
all right,
when they went out to the locations and stuff.
So if Top Gun Maverick, which I would say maybe better looking movie than Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, huge monstrous movie. It doesn't look like they cut any corners. They're flying in real F-18s, probably a lot of insurance costs, all that stuff. If they can make that movie, if they can make Top Gun Maverick, think about that movie. Everyone who's listening right now, think about how awesome that movie was, how big it was. If they can make that movie for $170 million, don't tell me they can't make Indiana Jones for $170 million, because they can. So there's something, I'm with you, James. I'm asking that question. I want to know why it cost that much. And if, I guess, in my closing thoughts on this, because I know we're getting a little long in the tooth on this, but if they inevitably have to, because not all movies are going to be a Top Gun Maverick that get everyone in the theaters at $1.5 billion, and they're going to have to reduce costs, they're gonna have to figure out ways to make good movies. And I think $175 million, and you can give me Top Gun Maverick, there's no reason why other movies can't be made at that budget. That's all I'm saying. Now, James Cameron won't care. He'll be like, I'm going to spend $500 million on this because it's going to make $2 billion. But that's James Cameron. He's the outlier.
Yeah. I also don't know, too, where James Cameron lies on, like, is he funding his own stuff? Is he pulling a George Lucas? I'm pretty sure he's still studio-based, right?
He's studio-based. Which
is weird because, like, it's not a Disney movie.
With Titanic, he made no money.
Or is it a Disney movie? Is Avatar 2 a Disney movie?
Yeah, Avatar 2 is Disney.
What was Avatar 1?
Fox, 20th Century, which is now owned by Disney.
That's why. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's weird. Okay.
So, and yeah, I mean, any final thoughts on this? It's an interesting topic, and we'll see how it all starts playing out. But
My thing about this is that I sort of said it earlier. Is like, I think if you just talk to me on the street and you said, do you think they should lower the budgets? I don't disagree. I think where I start to have some interesting pushback on this conversation is I go, so then if that's so obvious of an answer, is everybody going, why don't they just lower the budget and they'd make better movies or whatever? Why hasn't directors, producers, and everybody else figured that out yet? What is the thing that is causing Hollywood to be like, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I need 250 million, and playing in that game. And I don't have the answer right now, but I feel like it's one of those things where like that the cost of those big budget movies is keeping people going to theaters. And if they lower it back and they make some of these monies because they think it's going to make more money, I think people won't go to theaters to see them. And that in turn could collapse the whole industry, which is why they're still making these movies at the big budget, because they want the $1 billion return.
I think,
and they can afford it because they had $1 billion return. So they can allow 3 failures.
I think there's still going to be the market for the date movie, the romantic comedies, like Let's Go to the Theater, Dinner and a Movie, Barbie, that type of stuff. But
Barbie was a big budget movie that made a lot of money.
But I'm saying, in that spirit, let's go see Barbie together. A couple wants to go see Barbie together. A rom-com with Hugh Grant or Ryan Reynolds, whatever, that
isn't going to make $1 billion.
That costs $40 million to make, makes $160 million. Profitable movie. That's what they want. They want to make money on movies. They don't all have to bring in $1 billion.
Yeah, but they can't make more movies with that profit.
Maybe they can make another one of those. In
order to make that movie, they can make one more movie with that profit. But if they put more into a movie, made more profit, they can make 10 movies.
You're forgetting that movie then goes to streaming services and makes more money in that way. And,
well, we didn't really talk about it, but the streaming service argument is really interesting because you do still have Netflix making things like The Gray Man and Red Notice, when it's like, why? You're going to spend this huge budget and make this movie, and you're only hoping that people stay on your service.
It's crazy. That's crazy. I think that's crazy. I do. I think I think that is getting phased out. I think that was a mistake, and I think I
actually like both those movies though.
but I think that was a test, and that was to see what would happen if.
I don't know if they were justified though.
If we changed to this like direct to streaming stuff, well, look at what Warner Brothers did with their slate. They're like, we're going to make Wonder Woman 84 available the same day on HBO as it is in theaters. And that movie, brutal. That's why when people were saying, like, hearing Gal Gadot saying she's getting Wonder Woman 3, I'm like, there's no chance that's happening, especially with the new DC reset. But anyway, it's an interesting it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting topic.
If anybody knows anything about this, like some aspect of this that we're missing, whether it's me or John or both of us,
if you actually know,
put it in the comments and sort of say like, hey, I did some research on this a couple of years ago and here's the real answer. It's
I work in the film industry. And blank. But don't like fake it. Don't be like, I work in the film industry, and you work at Geek Squad at Best Buy or something.
Because I mean, I'm not going to get crazy deep into this or two, but like what we're sort of asking for is also like for the actors and the writers and stuff to be paid more, which is that not also essentially going to move the budget up?
But that doesn't. They're not fighting for Jim Carrey in 1997. They're fighting for people who have to make a certain amount to get health insurance. That's why they're striking.
But the studios would raise the price if they said, all right, well, if we have to pay you more, then we're going to have
the battle that they're in now.
So
it's an interesting topic. It is for sure. And I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. I know, we talked about Star Wars, but we really talked about it in the grand scheme of filmmaking, which is going to impact Star Wars, especially as we're, staring at these, at least 3 movies that are on their tentative schedule. But
and their TV shows.
Yep.
X amount of dollars on Andor, X amount of dollars on Obi-Wan, X amount of dollars on Mandalorian.
$250 million on Andor.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's why I'm thinking another topic, like try to get, like, put that thing out on Blu-ray and make some money back that way. Cause Star Wars fans will buy Star Wars Blu-rays. But anyway,
enough to make a profit, but not enough to move the needle. That's the only argument.
Enough to make a profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
every dollar we spend, we'll make $2. And they're it's like, let's make $1 billion movie and then just not worry about the physical copies of the show. Whatever.
Lacey will be back with us on TRB Live Thursday. As everyone, in case you don't know, everyone knows she's been sort of going half schedule. She's, pregnant with her second baby, and she just needs to take more time to herself, and we fully back her on that. So she'll be back on Thursday at Lacey Gilleran. Obviously, hit her up on social media. And for me, at Johnny Hoey, and James, of course, famously at Myra Trunks.
Bingo.
But we want to thank everybody for listening and watching and being a part of TRB. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, also the Will of the Force topics. Let us know what you think about everything, whether that's on social media at TRB Podcasts, or on the comments on YouTube or wherever. Just let us know what you think about all of this, and we love hearing from you on that. And a special thank you to our patrons. We talked about at the top. It is so important for us. So please do head over to patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast if you are able to. If not, totally cool. But a big shout out to our generals and spice runners: Carmelo, John RISI, Jetta Rosewater, Frank Grande, Darth Hurricane, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count Pepto, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, Colin Cormier, Jolton Jedi, DiMaggio, Diana, and Dave Hornack, and the Spice Runners: David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and THEFORTWORTHIAN. And make sure you're subscribing to TRB and sharing this with a friend who likes Star Wars, and get ready for the next Star Wars show, which is Ahsoka. We look forward to talking about that. But yeah, so we'll be back on Thursday for TRB Live. Anything else for our people out there, James, before we get us out of here?
No, actually, I think we're good.
All right. So we will see you all next time. Enjoy your weeks, and we'll see you Thursday night for another episode right here on the Resistance Broadcast. See you around, kids.